Welcome to another episode of Barman Saturdays. And this week I decided to take a look at the Legend of Sarila, which I got out of this 4-pack at Dollar Tree. So you just smell that quality. It just reeks of it. Because films are obviously better when they're dirt cheap. Instead of when they cost like $13 at Walmart. Being 25 cents. That's high quality watermark right there. When films are so cheap, you can buy them for less than $1. But, yeah, obviously that's bullshit. Films that I pick up from Dollar Tree are usually either, old new stock, for really good movies, like, maybe Men in Black, or, stuff like that, or Starship Troopers. Though I suppose you can argue your mileage varies on the first Starship Troopers movie. Though I did pick that up recently, though I think that was from Goodwill. So I got a used copy for $1, which I may already have had a copy floating around. I don't know. I'd have to look through my extensive collection at this point to figure that out. But as far as this film itself goes, I suppose the most interesting thing about it is the fact that it led to a lawsuit between Phase 4 Films and the House of Mouse itself. Yeah, Disney was less than thrilled about The Legend of Sarila's initial release, because when it was initially released in the US and I believe the UK market, it was underneath a different title. The title of Frozen Land. And yes, Phase 4 Films also copied the upcoming apparent design for Frozen's box art, as well as their font. So Disney was pissed that someone else was doing another one of those stupid mockbusters again, where they're trying to cash in on one of their new upcoming hot properties for themselves. So they're like, we're going to take you guys to court. And they did. Unfortunately, we'll never know what the court was going to say about this, because it was ultimately agreed to a settlement out of court between Phase 4 Films and Disney, where Phase 4 Films apparently agreed to give them $100,000, which I assume was mostly gobbled up by the lawyers, unless that was a separate fee that we don't know about, where they had to pay all of Disney's lawyer fees, as well as give them $100,000 in punitive damages. Don't know for sure, but maybe that was a thing. Maybe it was just $100,000 for mostly lawyer fees, and Disney got a little on the side out of it, because Disney's lawyers are probably really damn expensive, and they probably had more than one on the case. Phase 4 Films also agreed that they were going to, never do this shit again. So they're like, you can't, do any more of these mockbuster titles or renames of your films, because we won't stand for it. 3, they'd have to recall all the copies of Frozen Land that were still at retailers and online distributors, and just recall them and then reissue them underneath the original name, The Legend of Sarila. That's what Disney's like. You want to sell characters from this film as action figures and whatnot, it's going to have to be underneath their original names from the movie. And it's not going to be, knockoffs or allusions to our characters, because we don't want to deal with that shit. Like, it's going to be marketed as Legend of Sarila characters, not Frozen Land. I honestly don't know if they ever released action figures for the characters in this movie. I would significantly doubt it, but maybe someone can prove me wrong. I mean, if you can find them, feel free to tell me about it. But I can't imagine Phase 4 Films would really go to the bother, of doing that. As far as the film itself goes, it has an interesting idea, considering it's based on Inuit myths/legends, so you definitely get to look into another culture you don't usually see talked about in the United States, much less covered in films released in the United States usually. But at the same time, the execution was rather sloppy, if we're being generous. I mean, this film was released in theaters in Canada because it was advertised, as Canada's first CG 3D animated film or whatever, something like that. So it was meant to be like a show of, improving quality in the animation department, I guess, for Canadian studios. But at the same time, it's not a Disney or Pixar or any of those other big name studios production, so it looks rather bland and empty in a lot of places. Like, you'll be going over, these sweeping views of, the far north, and there's just no trees, and it's just very few mountains or hills, and it's just miles of snow. So it's very boring to look at. And then you got at least one antelope or whatever that just looks like it's comprised of polygons that were slapped together, and the same with a couple of trees in the paradise to the north known as Sarila. Stuff like that, just really hurts the film, because it just looks ugly. It's not the worst I've seen. I mean, I've watched Life is a Jungle and seen some other really cheap productions, obviously, from other foreign films made in, like, Brazil and South America and whatnot on an even smaller budget, so it's not the worst film I've seen. Not even close. I mean, there are some questionable animation decisions with the dogs, and they're pulling the sled into the land of Sarila, which, stood out to me, but for the most part, there wasn't too much, complaints I can throw at the animation, considering the low budget they obviously had, but at the same time, it's not particularly impressively animated either. It's sort of like when you look at, One Punch Man Season 2, it definitely doesn't stand up to One Punch Man Season 1 in terms of the animation. This just can't compete with the big names. As far as the story goes, there's some possibilities I suppose they could have done with the romance triangle they had going on, but they don't really do that much with it. Like the only time we really see the one character that's part of the betrothal get upset really with the other guy for trying to steal his girl is when he's being possessed by the evil shaman, using dark magic. And then he's like, I'm going to kill you for trying to steal my fiancé. And that's basically the only time we ever see him really get upset about it, because at the end of the film, he's just like, I don't want to be stuck in a loveless marriage with you based on a promise when we were kids. So, I'm letting you go from this betrothal. And then he's like, I'm going to be going on a journey anyway to go visit other Inuit tribes to learn more about being a leader. So I can replace my dad's, position as chief, and do an even better job of it in the future. And so it's just like, we have this plot point, but it gets settled so squeaky clean that, it's just like, why even bother with it? I guess it's nice to have a thing, maybe, but if you don't do much with that thing, it's kind of pointless. It's sort of like we get all this stuff to, like, maybe this big battle between, the upcoming new shaman and the evil shaman the tribe currently has, but we see, like, one magic exchange where the old shaman, like, turns his staff into a snake and throws at the guy. He responds by turning it into something else, and then the evil shaman summons a tornado. They both get sucked up into it, and the good shaman comes out the other side, healthy and fine, and the old shaman, I guess, sustains injuries that, fatally wound him that we can't really see on his body, so maybe it was spiritual injuries or something, where his soul was so weak and it just can't stay in his body anymore. Where he finally admits, to some of his misdeeds that screwed over his ex-wife. So, yeah, like, we have this big fight, we have these action scenes, but we don't usually see that much with those. That goes back to the whole low-budget issues, I suppose. But the story itself, just feels very paper-thin on characterization and stuff like that, and feels a bit padded out, especially when they go to the Sarila itself, when they're at the final barrier, and they just show a bunch of flashbacks and stuff we saw in the film. So they're just trying to pad out time, it seems, to reach the length that you can allow you to put into theaters. And that's always, a bad decision, in my opinion. Like, find some way to, like, beef up your story, instead of just throwing in padding. Because people hate when you're just wasting their time, because brevity is the soul of wit, as they say. So, yeah, at the end of the day, I can't be too upset with Legend of Sarila, because it's just mediocre. It's not bad, but it's not good enough to be in good either. It's just stuck in that middle-of-the-road spot. Not bad enough to really be worth hating, not good enough to really be watched to enjoy it. So it's just like a mediocre, forgettable animated film. Like there's hundreds of others that fall in that same category. Like there's lots of mediocre films that get made out there, and this just happens to be one of hundreds. I mean, if you can find it on the dirt cheap, pick it up, I suppose. You can just add it to your collection, if you like having binders full of movies. But otherwise, it's pretty much just a pass. Until next time, then. See ya.
The bear looked at me, so I looked into the bear's eyes and said, Nanook, prepare to die, for my clan is hungry.
Did Nanook speak to you?
No, but I promised I would pour fresh water in its mouth if I won the fight.
Why?
It's a way of thanking them.